Come on, move.
Draw.
I'm offering you a draw.
Borgoff never offers draws, but he's offering Elizabeth Harmon one.
Draw, you've got to be kidding.
So I think she should accept the draw.
Move.
One of the few good things to come out of the dumpster fire, also known as 2020, was The Queen's Gambit, which I loved. And due in large part to the massive success of that series, chess in America is really having a moment. Even non-players like myself are getting into it. In addition to watching all these chess games that I find oddly addictive, despite barely understanding what's happening, the series also reminded me of a movie about chess that I first saw when I was a kid. It's fascinating to revisit books and movies that you barely remember. Sometimes they're just as good, other times not so much. I'm happy to report that Searching for Bobby Fischer absolutely stands the test of time. I may have enjoyed it even more this time around since I was better able to appreciate it, both the quality of storytelling and the potential pitfalls the film faced along the way, the biggest of which may have been that it's based on something that really happened. I say that because real-life adaptations are tricky. On the one hand, you want to respect the material enough so that you're not altering it beyond recognition, but on the other, your highest priority is always to tell a compelling story. Since reality rarely fits into a 5-act structure, you inevitably wind up making changes. Make too many and you're left with something like Braveheart, a film so detached from reality it may as well be fantasy. But if you don't make enough changes, you wind up with something like Breach, which is about a real-life CIA person who gave secrets to the Russians. While that sounds like the basis for an interesting movie, it didn't turn into one, mainly because we never really see what this guy did or how he did it. The entire movie is about this elaborate sting operation used to catch him in the act, which we know ahead of time is going to be successful because the movie starts with the announcement that he's been caught. I'm not really sure what the filmmakers were thinking. I guess they figured the true story aspect would generate interest all by itself, but that's rarely the case. Just because something really happened doesn't mean people are obligated to care. Fortunately, Steven Zaillian, who wrote the screenplay for Searching for Bobby Fischer, knew we weren't going to care about the story, reality-based or not, unless it was well told. A huge factor of which, as far as I'm concerned, is that everything you need to know about the story, aside from common knowledge, is contained within it. That's what Breach got wrong. It assumed we were going to care about this person we didn't know simply because we were told that he did something significant in real life without actually showing us. Our subject doesn't make that mistake. It presents the story of real-life chess prodigy Josh Waitzkin as if it's fictional and takes us along on his journey. We watch Josh fall in love with the game before he even understands it. We watch him beat his father without even trying, despite having never been taught. And we watch him destroy everyone he faces while having fun in the process. But just when it seems like no one can beat him, we're introduced to 4 opponents that Josh is seemingly powerless against. His father, who blows up at a teacher for suggesting Josh is spending too much time on chess, then berates his son for losing to someone he probably should have beaten.
Maybe he's just better than me.
No, don't tell me that kid's better than you, because he isn't.
His teacher, Bruce, who takes all the fun out of the game by forbidding Josh from playing in the park against his friend Vinny,
Are you okay?
then tries to turn Josh into someone he's not.
You have to have contempt for your opponents. You have to hate them.
But I don't.
Jonathan, another prodigy who's more impressive than Josh and who possesses the killer instinct that Josh lacks.
Trick or treat.
And finally, Josh himself. As his confidence falters, he finds himself unable to stop playing a game that no longer makes him happy, all of which takes place against the backdrop of people who devoted their life to chess and wound up in pretty bad shape because of it. So not only do we wonder if Josh can still win, we wonder if he should even want to. It's a wonderfully self-contained story. At no point during it did I find myself asking questions like, who is this person and why should I care? As a result, the film managed to do what Breach couldn't and be narratively compelling. And remember, Breach is about espionage, which you'd think would be more interesting than chess, especially to non-players like myself. So, how was Searching for Bobby Fischer able to make chess exciting? The answer is that similar to The Queen's Gambit, the film only seems to be about chess, but is really about something else.
It's not really about chess. It's about the price of genius.
That's Anya Taylor-Joy, who played the lead character in The Queen's Gambit and who was asked to describe the series in as few words as possible. Her response is spot on, and it applies to our subject as well, but in a slightly different way. I'm guessing the price that Taylor-Joy referred to here was the psychological price that her character Beth Harmon pays. Harmon's greatest opponent isn't the person sitting opposite her, it's herself. She is her own worst enemy, but that's not really the case with 7-year-old Josh. He's not a tortured genius. He didn't come from a tragic background. He's very much a normal kid living the kind of life that all children should be afforded. He loves baseball, his room's a mess, and when he finds out that Vinny is homeless, he tells his mother that they should invite Vinny to come live with them.
You have a good heart.
The main conflict of the story is not internalized within Josh. He has no problem handling his own talent, at least not at first. What's harder for him to deal with is the outside pressure that's generated as a result of his talent. His father and Bruce come to resemble those awful parents and coaches you see at Little League games or pageants or wherever else who ruin things for their kids by taking whatever they're competing in way too seriously. As a result, the kids no longer compete for the fun of it, but rather to appease their parents and coaches. What's noteworthy about Josh's situation is he doesn't get this kind of pressure when it comes to anything other than chess. His father handles him playing baseball just fine. So what's the difference between the two? The answer, of course, is that Josh isn't exceptional at baseball. He plays like a normal kid. But when it comes to chess, he doesn't play like a normal kid. He plays like a genius. That's the price that he winds up paying. The price of success. Before everyone realizes how amazing he is, the game is its own reward. It's like he's discovered a new toy. Sure, he loves to win, but he also just loves to play, and losing doesn't have any real negative consequences. But after Bruce is hired as Josh's teacher and his father starts taking the game way too serious, losing is no longer acceptable. The game itself is no longer its own reward. Winning is now the only acceptable outcome, and the prize that Josh gets for winning is he has to keep playing against better and better opponents, like Jonathan, whom he doesn't think he can beat. That's why he loses on purpose here. He's afraid that eventually he'll lose no matter what, and when that happens, he's going to let everyone down.
Get more afraid. He's afraid.
He's not afraid of losing. He's afraid of losing your love.
That's where the real drama comes from. If all we cared about was whether Josh won some trivial board game that he enjoys playing, the story wouldn't be very compelling because there wouldn't be enough at stake. But thanks to his father and Bruce, we're not just wondering if he can win, we're wondering what the price of winning will be. What's it going to cost him? His love of the game? His relationship with his father? His childhood even? And if it does cost him those things, even if he goes on to achieve everything chess-wise, will that success be worth it? If Josh did what Bruce advised and viewed his opponents with contempt and hatred and devoted every waking moment of his life to chess, then he'd basically become Jonathan. While these two have some commonalities, they're both young and exceptional at chess, it's their differences that define them. Whereas Josh gets along with his opponents, Jonathan looks down on them. Whereas Josh has interests outside of chess, Jonathan cares about nothing else. And whereas Josh has a loving and supportive family, Jonathan's parents gave him to his chess teacher, whose affection is based purely on Jonathan's performance. So we're not just worried that Josh is going to lose to Jonathan, we're worried he's going to become him. He's going to turn into someone who's good at chess but bad at life. Kind of like the film's namesake, Bobby Fischer, who was the greatest chess player of his generation and some would argue ever. Throughout the film, Josh narrates Fischer's meteoric rise in the chess world, taking to the game at an early age, beating grandmasters when he was still a child, and ultimately winning the game at the highest level and becoming something of a celebrity. This led to an explosion in chess's popularity in America, basically doing for chess back in the 70s what the Queen's Gambit is doing for it now. But at the height of his fame, Fischer all but disappeared. He stopped playing professionally, became something of a recluse, and the rest of his life was kind of a mess. So the film's title doesn't just ask whether Josh will become the next Bobby Fischer, it's asking if he should even want to. Fischer was immensely talented and hugely successful, but the life he led, particularly after the age of 30, hardly inspires jealousy. Fischer's real-life downward spiral actually increases the drama of Josh's story by highlighting the potential danger that he's in. So again, from a narrative perspective, the film works incredibly well, and my hat's off to everyone involved. Now, normally this is where I'd stop. If I'm curious to see how accurate a story is that's based on real life, I might do a bit of Googling, go on Wikipedia maybe, but that's about it. This time around, however, I learned a lot more, but it wasn't on purpose. It's because I clicked on this interview with the real Josh Waitzkin, in which he talks about a book he'd written called The Art of Learning, which I thought sounded interesting, so I read it, and in the book he talks quite a bit about the time in his life that this film takes place. Quick disclaimer, if you haven't seen the movie and you still want to, you might want to stop watching here because I'm about to spoil even more than I already have. Okay, so how accurate is the movie according to Waitzkin? Does it pass the Braveheart test? Well, Waitzkin doesn't address the movie directly in the book, aside from saying it gave him a lot of unwanted attention, but he does confirm that he learned the game of chess as a child in Washington Square Park. However, it wasn't simply by observing it. His mother paid an experienced player to show him the game. I'm guessing that was the inspiration for this scene where his mother pays this person to play against Josh, who seems to have been inspired by Israel Zilder, who was the Latvian chess champion of 1958, but sadly wound up homeless in New York. Waitzkin did spend a ton of time as a child playing chess in the park, and that's actually where he met Bruce Pandolfini, who approached Josh's father when Josh was 6 and offered to teach him, which is the complete opposite of what happens in the film. And that's not the only thing about the Bruce character that seems a bit off. According to Waitzkin, Bruce was not the authoritative type. He never forbade Josh from playing in the park, and he never ordered him to hate his opponents. It doesn't seem like he had to. Even as a child, Waitzkin was ferociously competitive. As for Josh's father taking the game way too serious, Fred Waitzkin did say he found watching his son play incredibly stressful, but Josh never says it caused a rift between them. He and his father have always been close and continue to have a great relationship. Once again, it doesn't seem like Waitzkin needed anyone to put more pressure on him than he already put on himself. He hated losing so much that he found it physically painful. This fishing trip that he and his father go on in the movie sounds like an actual trip that Josh and his whole family took, but it wasn't so he and his father could repair their relationship, it was so Josh could recover from a particularly devastating loss during his first trip to the US primary championship. Though the movie made this game against Jonathan look like Josh's first trip to the US primaries, it was actually his second. As for the game itself, it didn't go like this. What we see was created by Bruce Pandolfini, who was a chess consultant on the film, which he also was on The Queen's Gambit. I'll leave a link to this video that recreates the game for anyone who's interested. Also, in the movie, these two only play once, but in real life chess matches are always at least 2 games since the player moving first has a slight advantage. I think 4 games is the standard, but I could be wrong. It is true that Waitzkin offered a draw to his opponent, and his opponent really did turn it down, but that opponent wasn't Jonathan, who's a fictional character. Instead, it was Jeff Sarwer, who was an excellent player himself. He won the World Youth Chess Championship the same year as this match, and unsurprisingly, he's on record saying he's nothing like Jonathan. And as for this guy, Jonathan's teacher and de facto father, he's fictional too. In reality, Sarwer was also a student of Bruce, though I don't know if both he and Waitzkin were students of Bruce at the same time. So the movie definitely made some changes, and I'm honestly glad I didn't know about them before I saw it, because I probably would have enjoyed it less. With that said, however, from a creative standpoint, these changes are definitely defensible. For one, it's a great movie, and for two, the changes are more on the scale of Apollo 13 than on the scale of Braveheart. The basics of the story are true, and the changes that were made all serve the story, by making Josh more vulnerable, by making the obstacles in his way, like his father, Bruce, and Jonathan, more formidable, and by just increasing the drama overall. You could even argue the movie's implication that if you play too much chess you might go crazy is a good use of creative license, since it increases the potential danger that Josh faces. Again, I'm not an expert on anything really, certainly not on chess, but I am kinda skeptical that playing too much of it will turn you into a raving, paranoid anti-Semite. But hey, what do I know? For what it's worth, Bobby Fischer was once asked what his life would have been like if he wasn't so devoted to chess, and he answered, well, it would have been better, you know, a little more balanced, a little more rounded. At the film's conclusion, which I may or may not have cried during, we're told that Josh Waitzkin is still one of America's best young players, but that he has plenty of interests outside of chess as well. Even though the events of this movie took place back in the 80s, it wasn't until I watched this interview with Waitzkin that I learned he walked away from chess in his early 20s. Unlike Fischer, however, his life didn't go to pieces afterwards. He just transitioned to other things that he found interesting, like martial arts and writing books, and found success there. Anyway, that's my take on searching for Bobby Fischer. Let me know what you think. Check out these links if you're interested. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.